So, thank you for being here. This is our very first baking workshop. I'm really excited. My first love was baking. I started out as a baker. I think I'm probably a little bit better of a baker than I am a cook. I like the rules of baking. You really should follow the recipe. And that is the first most important thing that I can say about any kind of baking is follow the recipe and read the whole thing through before you start, because a lot of times they're not written very well. Sometimes they're really out of order. Sometimes you might discover something at the end that you wanted to know about before you get to that point in cooking, like it needs to rest for 6 hours, anything like that. So just read through the entire thing, and that gives you a really good understanding of what you're doing. So I sent out the 2 recipes earlier in the week. If you didn't get them, that's fine. I'll send them again after the class, and you can kind of follow along as I talk. We're making blueberry muffins and oatmeal chocolate chip cookies today. They're both really quick and really easy, which is why we can get 2 recipes out of the way. I also chose these because I like them, and I know that I can make them either in my mixer or not in a mixer, just with a bowl by hand. And I didn't know what everybody was working with at home. And because we all have different equipment and different time, hi everybody, welcome. Just getting started. We're gonna just start explaining the recipes. And like I was saying, these 2 are really great because you can just make them in a bowl with your hands. You don't have to have any fancy equipment like a KitchenAid mixer or even egg beaters, which are great to have though. I do recommend maybe one day having those. So looking at the recipes, you can see that the prep time and bake time are pretty similar. We're working with really, really fast recipes here. There's about 10 minutes of prep on both, 20 minutes cooking on the muffins, 10 minutes on the cookies, give or take, depending on your oven. The temperatures are different though, so that's something that you really need to pay attention if you're going to be trying to bake more than one thing in an afternoon. So we're going to be baking the cookies first because they're at a lower temperature. We don't want to have the oven at a high 400 and then put our cookies in, even though we turn it down. It'll take a while to come from 400 to 350. It'll actually go from 350 to 4 a little bit faster, and it won't hurt the muffins as much if they're at a lower temperature as it would hurt the cookies if they were at a higher temperature, if that makes sense. So we just want to think about a little bit of balance when what we're cooking. So we're going to get the cookies done, mixed, and in the oven, and then we're going to mix our blueberry muffins and then swap the oven and get it all done. And by the end of this hour, you're going to have 16 beautiful big cookies and 10 nice blueberry muffins to hopefully share with people I'm maybe not going to share, but we'll see. So cookies first. Like I said, you don't need a mixer. If you have one and want to use a mixer just because of arms or tired or anything like that, that's perfectly fine. I like to, when I'm baking, get everything out, just everything. I go through the recipe, like I said, first thing I do is read the entire thing, and then anything that I need just gets dumped out onto the counter, equipment, ingredients, anything like that, just so that I'm not shuffling around and I have to pause and wait. It's just kind of like when you're cooking, you get all your prep together and then you cook. It makes it a lot more practical and just sort of easier and more fun, and it's actually easier to clean out this way. So for the cookies, I've got everything here. All we need is one big bowl. Yeah, this is just the one big bowl method, and that's why this is really fun. But the 2 different things that we're focusing on with these 2 different recipes today, and this is real baking 101 stuff, these are the 2 different main mixing methods of your like simplest baked goods. You have the muffin method, which is my very favorite band name of the day. I'm bothered a lot of people in culinary school with that. The muffin method and the creaming method. The creaming method is used for like all cookies. You beat the sugars, the butter, the eggs really, really well, and then you add everything else in. Hence the name creaming method. You're creaming all that stuff together and then adding. The muffin method is a specific method of mixing your wet and your dry. You probably have heard of that before or have done that before when you've baked. You've had recipes where you've been taught to mix your wet ingredients and your dry ingredients. You might not have known that that was the muffin method. Now you do. So that muffin recipe is going to go to the side so I don't keep getting confused. The cookies are going to come with me over here. I just want to grab everything that I need for this, which I know I've got my baking sheet lined with parchment. My oven is already preheated to 350. That stuff is kind of set aside. If you don't have parchment paper, you don't need it. You can use one of those silicone Sil-Pats if you have that, or just regular pan spray on the bottom of your sheet pan so it doesn't stick too bad. I'm going to bring my large bowl. And for this, I'm going to use a really strong spoon. I like to use wooden spoons for things like this because I know that they're not going to like give out on me, and they have stability, and I can scrape down the sides. I can just kind of really go to town with a wooden spoon, as opposed to like a rubber spatula. It doesn't really quite have the same strength to it. So it's 1 egg. A well-written recipe, and I hope this one is written in the order that you should be doing it. So if you find a recipe online that's like, it tells you to mix all the dry ingredients first, but the dry ingredients are listed all over the place in the ingredient section, it's not a well-written recipe. I would probably go try to find a different recipe. I want to have everything nearby. I do have my 1 stick of butter very soft. If you read the recipe, it says very soft, so I pulled it out not that long ago because I live in Hollywood and it's very warm today. So if yours is not very soft yet, you can put it in the microwave for about 5 to 10-second increments, just still wrapped up in its paper on a microwave safe plate, and just kind of like zap it for a few seconds at a time to get it to soften, not completely melt, just until it's soft enough to when we beat it, it's not going to be too hard for you to beat it up all together. We want our brown sugar and our regular sugar. And these are the things we're going to be beating together first: the butter, eggs, sugars, and our vanilla extract. I have measuring cups out. I have measuring spoons out. So if you need to take a second and get things organized, all the tools that you're going to need for this, go ahead. I'm going to do the same. And kind of move aside things that I don't need until the muffin recipe comes along. Keep yourself a little organized here. All right. So quite simply, you just put all these things into the bowl together at once. This is your 1 large egg. When a recipe says large, extra large, medium, that actually does make a difference when you're baking. If you are going from like jumbo to large, if it's that small of a difference, or like just the 1 size difference, that's probably okay. But if you have medium eggs and the recipe calls for jumbo eggs, it is going to actually make a difference in the amount of volume and wetness, that it has in the recipe. So you do kind of want to pay attention to the size of egg that it calls for. I tend never to crack the egg on the side of the bowl. It's just a tip I learned in school and in many bakeries since then. You have a much higher chance of getting eggshell into your food. So I just crack it on a slightly flatter surface, right on the flat side of the egg, and that gives me a good place where I can put my thumbs in and then just pull it apart. Much less chance of getting a lot of broken pieces into your bowl before you start mixing. So that's it. It's just 1 egg for that recipe, so you can set these away. 1 stick of butter. Very soft, but not liquid. Great. Our sugars. We are doing ½ a cup of light brown sugar. Now, if you had medium or dark brown sugar, that would probably be fine. You would just need to kind of watch the temperature that you're cooking, or it might caramelize a little bit more on the bottom. That's all. You wouldn't want to use a dark pan for that. But it would make it sort of more of like a molassesy flavor. It wouldn't be bad at all. So that's just ½ a cup of the light brown sugar. And it says packed, I believe, right? Yeah, that really means that. You can use your hands, you can use a spoon, you can use a spatula, something like that, but it means pack it in there to make sure that it is a very dense ½ a cup. And then you want to scrape the top down to make sure that it's level also. If it's mounded, then you're getting too much sugar. You want to make sure that you're really measuring correctly. Very important in baking. And then we're only doing a ½ cup of the plain white granulated sugar. gonna shake that so it's level. All right, we have our basic ingredients. All we need here is vanilla, 2 teaspoons of vanilla. A lot of flavor that comes from this extract into these cookies, which actually really helps a long way. These cookies have slightly less sugar than other cookies that you might find. So it's 2 teaspoons. But also this vanilla really brings out the flavor of the chocolate chips and everything else. It just gives it that sweet dessert flavor. So now I'm gonna get my workout today. We're doing arms, all right? I work for the recreation department. This is fun. We're going to go to town. It's called beating it. So you would use the like beater attachment on your thing, not the whisk, the blade. If you're using your mixer bowl, you use the blade attachment. If you have whisker attachments, that's fine too, but all you're trying to do is get this to be as creamy and fluffy and light colored as you possibly can. So we're going to go to town on this for a good like minute and a half. You can switch arms about 45 seconds in. That's what probably all of my coworkers would tell me to do. I have arthritis in this arm, so this is not fun, but it's a really good workout. You just switch sides. You can see already this color is really developing as a pale brown, tan kind of khaki color. Oh, I'm useless with my left arm. This feels so weird. I need to become more ambidextrous. Okay. So I'm probably gonna go for another 30 seconds or so. This is what is going to give your cookies a lot of their cake-like texture. It's going to make sure that in the end, the sugar dissolves and it's all kind of melted together. Same with the butter. Giving this much volume and air to the eggs is going to help it rise. The only other rising agent we're going to be adding is some baking soda. Baking soda is a leavening agent, but it also tends to crisp things up. So in order to keep it kind of in like a nice, also chewy aspect, this really, really helps. So you can see how thick that's gotten. You see in the bowl, it's like spoonable now. So I'm gonna stop because I'm tired. But that's what you're looking for. It was really loose and almost liquidy at first, sort of a dark brown from that vanilla. But you should have a pretty thick, spreadable, scoopable, fluffy, light beige mixture there. And then all you're gonna do is measure your other ingredients and add them right into that bowl. So it's gonna be all your dry stuff, basically, your oats, flour, baking soda, and salt. Now salt, in this situation, I love kosher salt. I love the big granular salt. I love like nice fancy salt. That's not for baking. That's for cooking and doing other fun things with. But regular salt, just granulated, I'm using regular like table iodized salt. That's what you should use in baking recipes or like fine grained sea salt. As long as it's like the small grain salt, that's what the science has been worked out. When whoever wrote these recipes for you, they were not doing large grains of salt. And so if you measured out large grains of salt, the salt content would actually be different because it's like denser, it's different, it's gonna taste different. It might actually affect what you're baking if you're making things like bread. So unless the recipe specifically says to use like a large flake or a kosher salt, always try to just stick to a small fine grain salt. Hello, if you're just joining us, we're halfway through our oatmeal chocolate chip cookie recipe. We've got all of our sugars, butter, egg, and vanilla creamed together. This is our creaming method we're doing. I'm now going to be adding our dry ingredients. So I've got a half a teaspoon of salt going in. I know I'm going a little out of order. I just wanted to get this salt done while I was explaining it to you. I like to use the iodized salt just because then you get that extra nutrient that we all need as human beings. But you can use that sea salt, great. Okay, so that's the salt. We're gonna go back in order. 1.5 cups of old-fashioned oats. Very important Very important that you use the regular oats, okay? Not instant or like quick oats, because that'll be really, really mushy and gross in your cookies. If you're using just regular old-fashioned whole grain oats, try to look for those. The Irish steel cut oats, which are great for oatmeal, not so great for this. They would take a really long time to cook, which is not conducive to what we're doing. So regular old-fashioned oats. 1.5 cups, that's what I said. I'm just gonna go right in there. Kind of get it in the cup. Make sure you have just one level cup. Okay, right in the bowl. Then your half. Okay, and then flour and baking soda. I don't use any fancy baking soda, but I do buy 2 separate little boxes, one for the fridge and one for baking with. I don't mix the fridge one into my baked goods. My fridge actually has things like fish and stuff in it, and the baking soda will absorb that over time, and you will actually notice kind of a smell to your cookies. So it's about $1.50 for each little teeny tiny box, and I recommend the small boxes because you don't use more than a half a teaspoon at a time anyway. So get a separate one for your fridge if you do that with your fridge, like my mom taught me, or and then have a separate one for baking. So a very level half a teaspoon right in there. And then our all-purpose flour, 3/4 of a cup. I don't have a measuring cup that's 3/4. That would be very cool. I just used a 1/4 cup. And for flour especially, it's very important that you level that off. So I'm just going to use the handle to one of my other measuring cups, and I just sort of brush it off back into the container and make sure that that's very level. So I just need 3 of these to make 3/4. This is a really fun project to do with kids, especially now that we're all trying to help homeschool people. My brother has 3 children. This is a great math project. All right, we've got all of our dry and all of our wet all in one. Make sure we check the recipe a few times as we do this. We want to stir these ingredients to combine. Cookies, you can't really overmix cookies, but you only want it, you're just worried about getting it until your dry and wet have really combined well. So you might need to put a little bit more elbow grease into it. I know I told you you were done working out, but I'm like a real trainer now. I lied. There's always more working out. I love it. I work out like 5 times a day now because there's nothing else to do. It's good. And then all we need now, next step, add the chocolate chips. And we're going to stir that to combine, but we're not going to put very much elbow grease into that. We want to be pretty careful, not break up all of our nice chocolate chips. I think on the recipe I wrote down the minis, and that's just because I think they're really cute and fun. And they sort of spread out more and you get more chocolate in each bite. I don't actually have those. I just have regulars, and that's okay. So it's 1 1/4 cup semi-sweet chocolate chips. If you want to use peanut butter chips, go for it. If you want to use dark chocolate chips, go for it. It will not change the outcome of the bake. It will only change the outcome of the taste, and that's up to you. So that's the fun place you could play around, or you could do raisins instead. And I would say that it would be pretty much the same measurement quantity of any of those add-ins. You could do dried cranberries and chocolate and like split it up. You could do a lot of fun things. It's a good base recipe. I'm going to stick with chocolate. I'm a classic girl. So for that, you want to do sort of more of a fold. You can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm scraping around the outside and then bringing it over itself. You want to gently kind of just add in all the chocolate chips without breaking them up into pieces or anything like that. You don't need to overmix that. That's it. Okay, I'm gonna, loudly tap that off. I am going to scrape this off. This is, every little bit counts for all these cookies. I want to get all of this stuff off of this spoon into our bowl, as much of it as possible. All right. So the pan is ready to go. I have a scooper. This recipe makes 16 cookies, although you can always just change the size of your cookie and lay them out in slightly different ways. But you just want to make sure that there's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches between each one, because they will melt out a little bit. Yeah. If you're making them big, you need 2 inches. If you're making them like minis, you only need about 1 inch, I would say. Put this here so you can see. Yeah. So I'm going to kind of make these a little rough, not perfectly scooping them. I'm only going to bake, well, this clearly makes 16 very large cookies, because I'm going to have 12 regular size cookies and lots of cookie dough, well, you know, about half the same amount of cookie dough left over. So I could double this again, but the fun part about this recipe is it freezes really well in raw form. Just wrap it up really tight in saran wrap, and I'll have my own little log of cookie dough ready to go in the freezer. It'll last in the freezer for about 4 months, maybe up to 6, depending on how well you really wrap it. But they will be baked long before 4 months is gone. It's just about double the amount. I think you can see that there. Yeah. So this would make very large cookies or medium cookies. It's a good quantity to see. I'm just going to make sure that they're all sort of generally in the right area. Spread them out. And those are going to go in the oven. This oven, like I said, was at 350, and my rack is right in the middle of the oven, not too close to the top or the bottom. You want it on one of the racks right in the middle. Okay. I'm going to look at it as 325. That's great. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes. That's our maximum time. It says baking 10 minutes. I'm going to check them a little bit before that, because my oven is not even. The front is much hotter than the back, and yours likely is the same, I think, because the heat is trying to escape out of the seals around the door. And it's also my oven hotter on this side. I don't know why. Maybe it's because my whole kitchen is slightly slanted. I don't understand the physics of that, but I'm going to talk like I know what I'm talking about. But anyway, this side of my oven is much hotter. So I know that the cookies on this side of my oven are going to get cooked faster, get browner faster than the ones on this side. So I want to give that tray a 180 spin part of the way through cooking, just to make sure that everything is getting a really nice even heat. If you have an oven that is really, really uneven heat-wise, one trick, and I do this in my oven as well, is a pizza stone, which is just like a plain ceramic tile, unwaxed or anything, like nothing glossy or shiny, nothing painted, but just a regular pizza stone. And I just keep that in the oven all the time, and it really helps create a more balanced heat throughout the oven. I also bake a lot, so that just is a good thing to have in there all the time. Okay, so we're going to move on. While that cooks, we want to get our muffins mixed. The muffins, we're going to use a totally different mixing method. Like I talked about, this is called the muffin method. I can't help it, it's so fun. Okay, so that one we're going to mix our wet and our dry separately. So you need 2 bowls for this. I've got that here. And you will probably need a whisk and like a spoon or a spatula. Okay, so we're going to quickly put these together. I'm going to get a different wooden utensil. Let's try, sure. Okay, so we're going to go, according to this, we would preheat the oven to 400. Our oven is already going to be preheated to 350. So when we swap these baked goods out and then turn the oven up to 400, it's going to get there pretty quickly, and the muffins won't be hurt by those first couple of minutes as the temperature rises. It'll be fine. So that is happening. We also need to line our cupcake trays. If you don't have little papers, that's fine. If you can't get them or don't want to spend that extra little money, that's super fine. You can always just pan spray the the pan, but you also just want to kind of use like a better pan. Make sure that it's maybe one of the nonstick ones or really clean and then really well greased on the outside. Muffins can kind of get sticky, it just depends. But I do have adorable little things from like years ago, and they're blue, so that's perfect for our blueberry muffins. So I'm just gonna line these really quick. Our recipe only makes 10 regular sized muffins. So we're gonna have 2 empty holes here. We don't wanna leave them empty though, because it's gonna create kind of a really hot spot in the pan. And then these other muffins that are right near those 2 hot spots are gonna get extra hot. So to fix that, you fill up those 2 little holes with just a tablespoon or 2 of water. And that'll just really even out the cooking and help make sure that this pan doesn't also get scorched. So just enough water in there so that it doesn't cook away and burn up, and just helps kind of even out all of the cooking temperatures throughout the pan when it goes into the oven. So I got that done. Our pan is ready to go. We're gonna move into mixing our ingredients. If you were using the little baby muffin tins, which are adorable, you also still want to use muffin liners, which they sell, little mini muffin cups, or just spray the heck out of it. That would make about 20. So you would do the same thing. You would use a 24 pan and then fill the extra 4 with a little bit of water. So we're going to mix the dry ingredients in this large bowl. We've got flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt. Flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt. Now it's important to really make that differentiation. Baking powder this time, not baking soda. We put in baking soda, they wouldn't rise quite as much, they wouldn't have sort of a nice cakey texture, and they would get a little more crispy around the edges. It would be a different kind of a science. Baking powder is what we're using with this recipe. So we're going to measure our stuff in. We need 1.5 cups flour. And this again calls for all-purpose flour. If you are using a gluten-free blend, you can just use those like cup for cup and it will replace 1 for 1. If you had like whole wheat flour, it would be much denser. So you would want to cut out about 1/4 cup. Like if it's a 1.5 cups of the all-purpose flour, you could do it with whole wheat, but I would just use about 1 cup to 1.25 cups of the whole wheat flour. It's just a lot denser of a flour. Yeah, there's a lot of different flour alternatives, and if you're getting into like some of the more interesting ones, like rice flour or things like that, then I would just look up a recipe that specifically uses that kind of flour, because that's a whole nother science. And so it's not really just about replacing one for the other. So we've got our 1.5 cups of flour in there. We're going to do 3/4 cups of granulated sugar. So again, I need to do 3 of my sugar scoops here, making sure that's level. Just want to give a look here to our cookies. I'm going to spin that tray around. We're about halfway through. Yeah, see, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you this. Some of them on like this side are super melty. And then over here has like barely begun to melt. Can you kind of see the difference? There's always a little bit of a difference, and I want to just, you can get to learn your oven as you bake further, but I know that this is going to take a little bit there. Okay, so that is going. Gave it that good 180 spin. This, we have our flour, sugar. We need 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Little baby. And 2 teaspoons of baking powder. You want to make sure that you're using like the side of the little jar or the box or whatever it comes in to scrape it off and level it so it's nice and smooth. 2 teaspoons. Okay, we're just going to kind of whisk that together so all the dry ingredients have mixed together and incorporated together, and all the salt's not in one corner and that kind of thing. It's just nice mixture of dry things. And that's going to sit there off to the side. We're going to mix our wet ingredients in this smaller bowl. Separate bowl, measure the oil, egg, milk, and vanilla. So we want our canola oil. I have canola oil. If you have vegetable oil, if you have, we had a great question via email. If you have another kind of oil like grapeseed or even safflower, that would be fine. As long as it's a really neutral tasting, light colored oil, that will work. So I'm going to use my canola oil. We need 1/3 of a cup. When you're using liquid, I really highly recommend using the liquid style measuring cups, which have the pourable spout on them. It's a little bit more precise. The dry measuring cups are, you never really quite know, is it up to the very top or up to the bottom of the lip, or like you just use these cups and you go to the line that you're looking for. So we're going to do 1/3 of a cup. Canola or light colored neutral oil. This is another recipe with just 1 egg, which makes it a little bit hard to divide. If you did ever want to divide it in half, the way that you could do that is to get your egg broken and whisked up into a bowl separately from everything else and then just use half of it. It's a way to kind of generally split 1 egg in half. Again, not on the edge of the bowl, just kind of generally off to the side. 1 egg right in there. Now the recipe says 1/3 to 1/2 a cup of milk. And one of the notes is it's going to be thick. So we start with 1/3, which is the lower quantity. And then if at the end of mixing, we think that it's too thick and too dry and the flour has not been able to absorb or mix in well enough, then we add that extra little bit of milk. So I'm just going to start with 1/3. We need our vanilla again, and that is 1½ teaspoons. This is really going to help accent the flavor in the blueberries. 1 and a half. Okay, so that's all of our liquid ingredients there. We are going to mix these all together with a whisk. You want to break that egg yolk up. You want to get this pretty well. Ooh, timer. Okay, now I can just see that they need a little bit more time, which is fine because we're not done mixing. I'm going to turn it around one more time, make sure my oven is set to the right. Yeah. I'm going to put that back for about 5 minutes, but we will keep our eyes on it. This is something about baking that the recipes, everyone's oven is a little bit different. So it's about 10 to 15 minutes, and it could take 10 in your oven, and it could take 15 in mine. So we're going to whisk this back to the muffins. We're trying to emulsify this so that the egg and the oil really come together. The milk kind of helps bind it. Vanilla will help flavor it. You do want to give it a little bit of volume, that egg. If you aerate the egg, it'll help aerate your muffins and have even nicer, fluffier muffins. Because once we mix this wet ingredient into the dry ingredient, we're going to mix it really, really, really gently. At that point, you don't want to overmix. That's one of the most important things when it comes to the muffin method is at this point, we're going to be really gently folding it all together. And once it's together, we're done. So I'm going to set the whisk aside. I'm done with that for now. Not in there. We're going to bring our dry ingredients here. The next thing, we're going to add this milk mixture to the dry ingredients. I like to, I think you can see that, make a well in the center. Like push your flour, dry ingredients kind of to the sides of the bowl. And then you're going to pour your wet ingredients into that center well. Just creates like a little nest for it. Looks sort of pretty. And it lets you be in control of folding in the flour from the sides. It just makes it a little bit easier to not overmix. We want to make sure that the flour is in there, but that's it. Like that's all you're trying to do. So if you're doing this in a electric mixer, you need to use the paddle attachment, and you need to use it on the very lowest speed, and you kind of just want to pulse it, like let it bring the flour together, just so. And that's why I kind of like using the spatula, because then you can just kind of fold it and like kind of spread it in there, and that helps get the flour in without actually mixing it. You just sort of tap down the sides of the bowl, get it all in, but really gently. You really don't want to overmix it, or you will ruin any aeration or fluffiness that you want, and you're going to have really dense muffins. I'm sure you've all had that muffin that's like, oh, there's like no flaky, crummy, airy bite to this. It's just like hard-packed muffin. That's because it was way overmixed. So at this point, then we're going to put in berries. I'm going to do blueberries. You could put in any berry. If you find like frozen berry medley or fresh raspberries, all you want to really make sure that you're doing is that they're very, very dry if they're fresh. So if you're using fresh berries of any kind, wash them and rinse them like you would with any produce, but then they have to be extremely dry before going in here. If you're using frozen, you want to leave them frozen until the very last minute like I just did. Because if they start to thaw early, then all you're going to have once you mix them in here is gray, because all the blueberry juice is going to come out, and it's going to turn your beautiful muffin, yellow, bright muffin batter into like a mauve, that kind of gray purple color. We don't want that in a muffin. So you wait until the very last minute if you're using frozen berries of any kind. And it says 6 to 8 ounces. It's about a cup. It just sort of depends on the size of the berry that you're using or how berry full you want your muffins to be. I'm going to go with about this full cup measurement of these blueberries and just right in there. And then I'm going to quickly but carefully, gently just fold them in. You can see that some of the blueberry juice is already starting to bleed. And we don't want to have a bunch of just one color. We want to see that blueberry and that blueberry juice, but we don't want it to bleed throughout. That's about all I'm going to do, because they're already breaking down a lot. So now I want to scoop them into our muffins, and they will bleed in together in the muffin pan while they bake. Okay, we're going to straighten up a little bit. So these make 10 regular size muffins, which means you just divide the batter up evenly. To do that, you can use that scoop that we did, or any other kind of size scoop that you have. I'm just going to use the same one, because it's the largest one that I have. And so you measure, each cup gets 1 scoop, and then if there's batter left over, you do, each cup gets another half a scoop or so. You just try to measure out the exact same amount in each cup. That's how you know, but you know you're going to end up with 10. Also very important as you do this, that you make sure you're getting at least 1 or 2 nice big blueberries in each scoop, because then you know each muffin has a bunch of the delicious berries in it. So I'm just doing 1 of the same size scoop in each of these cups. And then we're going to go back and do that again, and that's how you know you've measured them to be proportionally the same. Can you kind of see in the bowl how that blue color is starting to turn a little gray on the edges? That's why you want to really avoid using any of those blueberries too early. If it's already doing that now, imagine what it would be like if I had pulled those blueberries out of the freezer any earlier. Okay, then I'm going to go back in, and I can see that I have enough batter in here to do another full scoop per thing. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be 3/4 to full in each cup. And then we get that nice little muffin top on top. It's the only time in life that we all want a really nice muffin top, right? And then if you go back and it looks like one of them has too much compared to the others, you can kind of spread it out, get a little spoon or use your scoop to even out some of that love. We're getting a pretty good disbursement here. You can smell the cookies, which usually is the perfect telltale sign that they're ready. So this is a great transition. You really do want to scrape all of that stuff out of that bowl. That's like a whole nother scoop worth, actually, once you scrape it down with your spatula. But I just kind of want to move on in time here, and I think these are all well full enough. I had a pastry chef instructor in culinary school who would judge us by how well we all scraped our bowls, because every single scrape is another dime that the bakery is spending that you're throwing away. Okay, these look perfect. They are going to be a light honey brown, and they are going to get a dark honey brown as they sit on your rack and cool. They continue cooking. There's a good amount of that brown sugar in there, which is going to keep cooking. It's all going to keep cooking. There's always carryover. But these have a really nice golden brown, especially around the edges. You can see that they've gotten crisped up, and that's perfect. Usually I teach cooking classes in the afternoon, and so I have dinner ready, and now I have dinner ready in cookie form. Okay, and so we go immediately to turn this down up to 400. So up in your oven, and then the muffins can go in. It will raise in temperature fast enough that it's not going to hurt the baking process. For home baked goods, this is fine to do. You could, if you have a really finicky oven and it takes a long time to preheat and you know that about it, then you might want to wait until it gets a little closer to 400, but mine's going to crank up pretty quickly. So those muffins go in now. So all of our baking stuff is working. That's what we call it in the kitchen when you have things that are happening and nothing left on the to-do list. It's all working. So I'm going to do a little tiny cleanup while I kind of talk to you, but that's going to only take about 10 minutes. So again, I don't want to forget. Well, the recipe says 20. Let's see what it's going to take. I know we only, oh my goodness, my timer. We only have about 15 minutes left on the clock according to class, but if we end before these are done, I will take a picture and put it on our Instagram page, of course, so everybody can see it. Because at this point, I can answer questions and I can help guide you along if you're still working, but that's pretty much those are the methods, right? The creaming methods and the muffin methods, which are the two really important things that we wanted to learn today. Creaming method is any cookie recipe that you ever try to do is going to ask you to do that. You're going to cream your butter and your sugars and often your egg together. Sometimes it's the butter and sugars first and then you add in the egg. But these one bowl recipes are really nice that you can just kind of get it all done in one and have only one thing to clean up. So that's the creaming method. Really, it's really important to get that sugar and butter and egg as fluffy as you can. And you notice that it went from pretty liquidy and soft to almost thick and peanut buttery, which is good workout and really good aeration. So that gave our cookies the perfect blend and the way for the butter, the fats, and the sugars to all melt and dissolve at the right pace, the right temperatures throughout the cooking process, so they don't melt out completely. That means you either didn't mix in your sugar well enough or you have too much sugar, if they're really thin and lacy around the edges and they just melt out, or your butter wasn't soft enough, you maybe have chunks in it, and then that's going to cause like weird pockets in your cookies of melting. Like, it's a really important process to pay attention to how well you can cream things when you're doing that method for that kind of recipe. And then similarly for the muffins, how important that separation is, and then that slow, easy mix in of the wet to the dry. If we had overmixed this, I'm gonna get like hockey puck muffins, and I wouldn't want to eat them for dinner. That would be really sad. You want to make them nice and fluffy, and you do that by getting the wet ingredients pretty well whipped together and then just gently combining them. Okay, so those are two really important and two very fundamental mixing methods for baking. You will find them used in other things, not just muffins and not just cookies. But when you encounter it, you'll be like, oh, it's the creaming method. Yay, I know this one. So you want to yeah, practice that, especially when you're doing it by hand. It's just a fun workout. You can always, the mixer is really much easier. And then depending on the recipe and how big of a quantity you want to use, if you wanted to make way more of these cookies, you had like a bake sale going on, you want to make hundreds of cookies, I would still recommend doing it in kind of smaller batches. Recipes don't increase exactly the same the higher that you get, depending on the ingredient. Like you could increase the flour and the butter and the sugar pretty much the same just by incremental value. But the baking soda and the baking powder, like things like that, they don't all stay the same. So you wouldn't really want like 6 cups of this baking soda in your recipe, even if you multiplied it out and it came to that. So I would recommend sticking to smaller batches, even if you need to do more, just kind of mix and then mix again. So that's why it's also really easy to do it in one bowl. Scoop out your dough once it's done, roll that up and freeze it, and then make another batch. Like I said, they freeze raw, the cookie dough, for up to about 4 months. If you baked it all and then put the cookies in a freezer-tight container and froze the cookies, that's at least 6 months. So you could last, you know, out in Alaska for a while with these cookies, which would be good. The muffins, they last maybe 2 to 3 days, but if you froze them, they would last maybe a couple of weeks. They just get kind of freezer burned. You want to eat these fresh, you know, so make small batches of the muffins, I recommend. This is kind of the smallest batch that this one makes, but you see it only makes 10 muffins, so that's, you've got a family, you've got a couple days worth of breakfast, and it's not so bad. But you could freeze them. You could freeze them for about a week, and then you'd have muffins made for the week, and that would be perfectly good. Just don't leave them out for too long; they'll get stale. That's how I recommend that. If anyone did have any questions, yeah, you can put it in the chat box here. Oh, yeah, in grams. You need to line silicone muffin tray. No, if you're using silicone muffin trays, you don't need to line them. Sometimes I still spray them depending on what I'm making in them, but no. The recipes that I've typed up, I haven't added the grams to them, but I can do the conversions and add them to that if before and then email them out again if you prefer using the recipe that way. Yeah, sure. I know I use a scale for a lot of my stuff, especially bread, but these like quick, easy recipes, yeah, I often just sort of instinctively type them out in cups and teaspoons. Are there classes in person? Well, we do have classes in person at UCLA when we are allowed back at UCLA. I don't know when that's going to be, hopefully sooner than later. And we opened last November. The classes that we have had up until the point that we had to leave campus were mostly programmatic. So like I did a lot of programs and workshops with nursing students based on classes that they needed to take for their curriculum, with med students, with certain on-campus student groups, through CPO especially. We didn't have a whole lot of just, hey, everyone can sign up for these classes online. We hadn't gotten to that point yet. We were almost to that point, and then all of this kind of started happening. So we've been building this as an alternative since we can't be on campus. I'm just going to do the same thing with these muffins. I'm going to give them that 180 spin. So I want everything to be nice and even when it comes out of the oven. And I can see that some of them are already rising up a little bit, and then some of them are not at all. So that shows me that my evenness is a little off, so always gonna spin. What is another question? How would coconut sugar change the recipe with either of these? That's a really good question. I have only used coconut sugar in recipes that were specifically designed to use coconut sugar. I don't think it would change it very much at all. Most commercially purchased coconut sugars have been made so that you can use them as an alternative sugar. So I think that I would definitely want to look up like if there's a specific transfer ratio, but I don't think that it would make too big of a difference. That's just an experience answer. I don't think it would make too much of a difference. Yeah. Is there a possibility for that to happen in the fall? Well, yeah, if we're back on campus in the fall and everything is back to normal, which we're hoping so, then we're going to be trying to make sure that these kinds of offerings are available through the recreation website, just like you would sign up for yoga and martial arts through recreation, you would sign up for some, yeah, teaching kitchen options right there on campus. The fun about doing these kinds of things is I can have, you know, as many people as are willing to show up for the afternoon. In the teaching kitchen at UCLA, as wonderful as it is, I love it and I miss it. It only fits 10 students and myself. So it does actually really limit things. I can actually reach a lot more people this way, but we are in the process of getting the kitchen linked up with webcams and cameras so that even if you couldn't actually be in the kitchen, you could be participating and watching, things like that. We're really trying to grow the program. This little stay-at-home situation, this whole thing has definitely put a wrench in a lot of people's lives and a lot of the development of our own program. But yes, I can't say exactly that we would start up the first day of fall because we have no idea what's going on in the world these days, and I don't like to commit to anything past, you know, tomorrow at 3. But yeah, the absolute goal, the absolute end goal is to have offerings, campus-wide offerings for anyone in the UCLA community who can sign up, first come, first serve, as many as we can fit into the schedule to have both baking and cooking fundamental classes. Yes, that is the whole goal and the whole ambition. And hopefully by fall, we'll have that ready to go. Yeah, just depends on how soon they let us back in to like get everything up and running again. Paleo baking recipes are much harder to manage. Yeah. One of my plans for this baking seminar, and I'll send you guys all what I planned out for each week. I won't have recipes yet because it all kind of depends on what I can find at the store. But in terms of what methods and what skills I kind of wanted to focus on each week, one of the weeks is going to be alternative baking using different flours, different milks, gluten-free, dairy-free, and so I think that that'll help fit into some of the paleo things. So yeah, one of the weeks later on in our little course, I think early June is when I planned it, will be alternative baking. And I was hoping to do all in one recipe, vegan, gluten-free, and what's the other one? Well, vegan covers dairy-free, right? I'm having a mind melt. Anyway, all the different alternative things that we can do with baking. And then the last week, I'm hoping we can get into bread. So we'll do an actual like full-on yeast loaf, and I'm going to teach you how to braid. But that might require homework. So hopefully you guys stick it out with me because you'd have to make some of the dough the night before, and then we can bake it all together. Yeah, these are going to take another few minutes here. I'm spinning them around one more time. I'm going to show you here. You can see, I think, like these in the center are not rising much or at all. They're still very raw, but then this one right here looks like it's going to be done in about 5 minutes. So it's all about your oven and being really aware of how it cooks and what side, and just spinning and paying attention. You don't want to do what I just did and leave your oven open the whole time because then that lets out all of the good heat. But, oh, maybe keto. Yeah, I'll look up some different, that might have been what I was thinking of. Yeah, although then that has higher fat content. But we can use a lot of protein in some of these bakings. I really love to bake with plain Greek yogurt as an alternative to eggs. And so there's so many different fun options that you can come up with and have a really delicious treat for yourself. It still feels like dessert or like kind of a sinful snack, but it's not, you know. So yeah, we're definitely going to focus on a little bit of that kind of alternative baking. I want to show you here these cookies. After they have set up a little bit on the tray and done the rest of their cooking, you want to take them off of the tray and put them onto a cooling rack. And any kind of thing that is raised up off of the counter or the cutting board that has, you know, ventilation, the air can get through. It's a good cooling rack. For a long time, I didn't have any, so I used to use the little racks outside of my toaster oven. Just take the little like cooking tray out of the little oven rack out of your toaster oven if you have one of those, and flip it over and you've got a cooling rack. Just make do with what you have. And these are just gonna come off here and they're gonna finish cooling. They're gonna get a little bit more set up on the bottom so that we don't have any soggy bottoms. If you watch Great British Baking Show, which if you don't, you should. If I teach you anything today, that show is worth watching. These are going to be so good. So they have a little bit tiny less sugar than a normal chocolate chip cookie, and we've added in the oats, but don't pretend that they're like good for you. They're just a little bit better for you than a regular chocolate chip cookie would, and they're really great. One of them goes a long way on a long hike. It's a really good, like, calorie dense, energy burning kind of a snack when you are out there like getting some good exercise or working in the garden or doing that kind of thing. Really, really nice, fun, healthy, not, you know, good cookie, great cookie. So that's that. That's just gonna cool on the rack for a little bit. And I'm afraid if any of you do have to go, then the muffins are probably not gonna be ready for another few minutes, but I will love the reference. I don't want to upset Paul Hollywood. Oh my God, if I ever encountered him, I bake a lot of bread anyway, and I would be so happy and so mortified if he ever ate my bread. It would be that kind of a thing, you know, like a musician playing for a great composer or something. Yeah. He's a funny TV guy, but he's an incredible bread maker. So there, yeah. Do you know how much an in-person version of this class would cost? I don't. I don't want to give you any of the wrong information because we were still figuring out fee structure on those kinds of on-campus classes before we got shut down. So I don't want to tell you any of the wrong details because I think it also depends on the program and the people and the timing and the course load and the actual recipes that we use and my assistants if we need them and all these kinds of things. That it's not just me who manages the teaching kitchen. There's someone much smarter and more organized at these types of things than I am. Kelly Shedd handles a lot of that stuff, and so I would definitely want to put you in touch with her if this were a question of like getting an actual class going for the fall, and you know, once we're all back on campus. But both her email and my email are on our Teaching Kitchen website, which can be linked. I think you all found it when you registered for this class. It's through the Fitwell website, so Fitwell Recreation UCLA, and then it's /Teaching Kitchen. You can Google search Fitwell Teaching Kitchen, all of those accesses, you can find our website. And on the website, you can find my email and Kelly's email. And, you know, if it's a question of trying to set up classes for the next school year, then that's the best way to start is by email. And can we reach out to both of us? And then she has far more skills than I in answering those questions. Yeah, thank you very much. See you at the next class too. Thanks, everybody. If you do want to stick around, I'm not going to turn it off because if anyone is just going to hang out until I'm done, that's fine. I want these muffins to come out. Otherwise, have fun baking. I hope you enjoyed everything. And I really do hope that you make these things and send me pictures of them. I get so proud when I see what everybody makes at home. And this is a fun one to make, especially when you need to have that little treat, that little pick-me-up. These muffins are delicious as a breakfast, as a snack. So yeah, I hope that this was fun for everybody. Oh, we're getting there. We're so close. Just gonna spin one more time. The thing about muffins, you really do need to make sure that they're all the way done. The best way to tell is a very, very small toothpick, or if you have a very thin, small knife, you can stick it through the middle, and if it comes out with any wet batter at all, then back in the oven it goes. If it comes out with crumbs, that's fine. That means that it's all crummy inside and it's done. If it comes out with nothing, that probably means that you've slightly overbaked it. So you're going for in between wet batter and completely nothing. You want it to kind of look like you stuck a stick into your baked muffin. So a little bit of crumb is good. Is there anything else that I can help with? Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, we're just gonna do a little tidying while I wait for these muffins to be done. Next week. Oh, let me get my little book. Sorry. Okay. Next week, I think I was thinking of doing another basic mixing method, which is called the biscuit method, and I'll give you 3 guesses what that would make. Biscuit, but it's also for pie dough. And pie dough and tart dough are some of the best things that you can have in your arsenal as a well-rounded baker. They are not easy. So that old saying, easy as pie, I don't know where that came from. I hope that they were kidding because it's not. You can really overwork pie dough this easily. I didn't like pie for the majority of my life because it was just kind of badly made. Freezer dough is usually a little overworked, and so it's kind of a denser dough. But I don't knock it if you buy it and use a quick dough. I have one in my freezer at all times for like a quick chicken pot pie kind of a thing. But making a good fresh pie dough is a skill, and it can be flaky and buttery and delicious. And I love a good buttermilk biscuit. Those are great for having in the freezer. They're great for breakfast. They're great for having with dinners. They're just great in general, and it was one of the first things I ever baked with my grandmother. So next week is going to be the biscuit method, and if I can find buttermilk, it's going to be buttermilk biscuits, which is even more exciting. So I'll send out the recipes as early as I can by the end of this week. So if you're doing any shopping, please do as little as you can, but hopefully you can get any of this stuff and play along. Ooh boy. Okay, I want to show you because we're getting so close that I think we're close enough for me to maybe let you all go home. I get it. But we want this to be, it's going to be a little bit longer. You can see on like this one, it's still a little wet. It's gonna stick to my finger just a little bit and then pull up. This is airy and fluffy, which is almost there. This one, which is in my hot corner, is pretty firm to the touch, and that's what we're going for. We want it to be just springs back when you touch it. So these are going to be just about, I don't know, 3 more minutes in the oven and they'll be perfect. But they're only going to come out, the only difference will be they'll be a little bit more golden brown. They'll look just like that, and you'll see I'll show a beautiful picture on Instagram. And I think that means we can call it for today. Really appreciate everybody being here, and I hope that you come next week and let me know if you have any questions. If you bake during the week, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.